Opportunity. I'm with Nick and Andrew, who are bringing us together to talk about The Flower, a short that's kind of a long lost gem from the Walt Disney animation studios in Florida.
I
Okay.
actually worked at the Florida studio for 15 years. I was one of the original employees from the day it opened to the day it closed.
For
Uh,
myself, I never have worked for the Florida studio or for Disney. I've just been a long-time admirer and long-time Burbank, California resident, so I'm close to the other Disney.
the Hat Building, as it's affectionately
Exactly.
called, yes. I've been doing a lot of research about the Florida studio. One of the things I found out is that there was a lot of after hours production going on there, and that's kind of where The Flower comes into play, right?
That is correct. The first real thing that came to fruition was Barry Cook's Office Rockers,
Hmm.
which everybody kind of did, in their own time after hours. I think we had like one caps machine for the entire studio, tucked away in a corner that
Yeah.
most people, didn't really even know about. And getting that one pushed through, and that was a bit of, like a cheerleader thing for me because I saw Barry doing something, and there was other guys around the studio, Rob Corley, Jim Jackson, all these other guys that were doing Paco, that were doing these real fun little videos that you can. They're actually out there floating on the internet that you can see.
Everything's on the internet. So
Yeah.
yeah.
But at that time, I was in the camera department early on shooting camera for The Lion King, and Gary Smith, my mentor, really encouraged me to get involved in story and writing, and I started pursuing that quite a bit. And I would do storyboarding on my own. Granted, they were just little tiny thumbnails,
Hmm.
like the artists would do when they would thumbnail their scenes, just to try to get the idea of could I actually visually tell something. And that was kind of how The Flower kind of came about, was putting my ideas together. Unfortunately, I mean, one way I didn't come up with anything funny like a lot of the guys were doing around the studio, but instead I went back to my love for Japan and my love for Japanese animation and Japanese cinema as a whole, and drew from that. And the idea was, what if we have just a flower as your main character in a short? And that's kind of where we rolled from.
Very nice. Yeah, I think it's a very especially for stuff coming out of there, which I know a lot of there's only three of them. The Roger Rabbit shorts came out of the Florida studio. Basically it was just wacky antics. I know Cranium Command, the pre-show was done at that studio. Um, yeah, so to have something serious and more dramatic, I think was refreshing, even though there were three full lengths coming out of there. One of which was Mulan, which kind of, even though it's China and The Flower's Japan, it has almost a similar look and feel. Uh, is that a coincidence in timing, or is that what's going on there?
It's a coincidence in timing. I mean,
Okay.
we're both drawing from Eastern art,
Hmm.
where Mulan drew very, very heavily from Chinese art, where I'm drawing from Japanese woodblock print. So
Hmm.
there's similarities and crossovers, of course.
But
Now,
in terms of timing, though, the flower started immediately after Mulan wrapped. So I think was it not like within a couple months, right, of the two?
If memory recalls, you're asking me to go back, hit the Wayback Machine, Peabody. Um, yes, yeah, we started actually doing some active production where I was basically walking around to the artist's desk because we were a show, so everybody had to show
mhm.
up for work even if we didn't have a film. So that downtime between films could be as long as 6 months to a year, and it was an opportune time to be like, hey, you want to do something? And got a lot of no's, but I got a fair bit amount of yeses, and that's how we started.
Nice. I'm glad you mentioned that you were a show, so you had to be working on something. I didn't want to dive too much into the Florida studio. I wanted to talk about The Flower, but that since you brought it up, I'm going to ask, what was it like to constantly have to be doing something because you did have a constant conga line of people just looking over your shoulder?
It progressed over the years. At first, it was make yourself look busy, and then
Okay.
when we realized people can't make themselves look busy for a year, then people would kind of float away. And sometimes you would come through the tour, and there wouldn't be a lot of people at their desk, But and that's kind of where animation services, and I'm going to touch on that. And Paul Carasi's team kind of split off for a few years and did a lot of little projects and stuff around the company. I think we did something for Splash Mountain, and just sort of all different little things
Mhm.
where he would bring those in to kind of help keep people busy and that sort of thing. Of course, he went it on, and animation services I think lasted for quite a few years as its own little entity. That's a rabbit hole. Just one thing.
Yeah, yeah, no. I you said you had the one caps machine, and it's funny that you say that to me because that was when caps took off, was in that same Florida era, because you guys opened in '89, which is right around the end of The Little Mermaid and Rescuers Down Under. So then you're jumping right into Caps after Rescuers Down Under, and you had the Florida studio, which celebrates here's how we hand ink and here's how we paint, and then it's just now computers, 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 computers.
Yeah, we shifted fully to digital on Mulan,
Okay.
for post production. So everything from animation check on back was strictly digital, and they put a lot of those people, well, those people, I was one of those people on the tour per se. Like animation check was where ink and paint kind of used to be, and they
Mm-hmm.
switched the whole studio around. My department, I ended up in final check for the last 7 years on Mulan, Lilo and Stitch, and Brother Bear. And I had to have screens that didn't have any glare. So we literally worked in a room that had no windows. It was, we had all the lights off, and you had a little lamp, so you could write your notes on what you had to
Mm-hmm.
fix. But you get a glare and you're like trying to look around the glare on the glass to try to see. And yeah, we had to be in complete darkness. So that was a change. But we were way off the main tour, which was kind of nice after being on tour for so many years, because I started in ink and paint. My first credit was a Little Mermaid, and we
Nice.
were painting, and the glass was like right here next to
Yep.
my head, and people coming through, and so it's a little disconcerting, but you got used to it real fast.
So then when you weren't doing that after hours, you were starting to do your thumbnails for the flower?
Was working on the flower, yes, sir.
Yeah. Now, one thing I thought was interesting is Disney is so locked up. If you've touched it at our studio, it's ours. It belongs to us. So when you guys both said we, in a rarity, which is an extreme rarity to, I'm not gonna lie, I had to double check and like go through and research all this. That you guys had the rights to it. I'm more curious about how that happened, because that is just a very,
Well,
very rare thing.
I can confirm the contracts were ironclad. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
if you did anything that was artistic, like I did writing, and anytime I finished a story, I would actually have to take it by them and give them first rights to take a look at it
Mm-hmm.
and all that stuff. So I know people that did Christmas ornaments, and they had to pass everything by them.
Yep.
The logistics of, I don't want to say logistics, that's not the right word, but the idea of going to our director of the studio at the time and be like, you guys don't want this, you guys, this is not a Disney thing, it's just
Mm-hmm.
the studio is going to close down, you're going to take all the artwork, you're going to throw it in the morgue, and nobody's ever going to see it.
Yep.
So what are the odds I can just take it with me? And it was Andrew Milstein at the time was our studio director, and he was just like, I don't know, I will check with legal. And legal came back, and there's like, here's paperwork, like a week later. And I walked out the door. I mean, if you'll forgive me, I'll move around my office here real quick.
Yep.
I walked out the door with boxes
Wow.
of artwork. Just, and I've had it in my closet for
And are those all individual frames?
Absolutely, every
Yeah.
single drawing, every layout frame, every design drawing.
There's a lot of material. There's thousands of pieces of art.
Yeah. Now, Nicholas's producer, did you have to like go through and make sure all that stuff was secured and everything?
Well, I mean, this has been a pretty simple process. Andrew was able to obtain, like he said, the permissions, the key things from Disney back in the day. And once you've got something like that secured, you don't mess with it.
Yeah.
You just leave it be. So our production process has been that I joined the film in 2021 after work had already resumed. A lot had already been done on it.
Not to interrupt, when did work resume on it? Because it hadn't been touched since the studio shut down.
Well, yeah, Andrew, maybe you best speak to that, because it always was in some state of activity, but main activity is more recent.
Yeah, we looked over the years. I always wanted to finish it. I thought about doing it live action. I actually thought about doing it 3D, explored different things, even paid to have some 3D models created. But I just ended up, Tom Bancroft is one of my good friends. He lives here in the Nashville area, and Tim Hodge, I don't know if you know who Tim is. He's a storyboarder on Mulan, lives here as well.
I think I recognize the name. I don't know.
Yeah, they've just encouraged me over we'd go have lunch, and they're like, dude, what are you doing with the flower? And I'm like, well, nothing, or I did this, or it's just, I don't know. And they're like, pick it up, you got to finish it. So it was just those guys. And I'm like, well, how can I finish it? And then we're like, well, if you start, maybe do a Kickstarter, which we did. And even though it failed, I actually had people sending me money, and that's what literally got us going again. But before the Kickstarter, I spent about 3 years scanning everything. So I literally started with a little tiny flatbed scanner and
Hmm.
finally was able to get up to a bigger one. And because we were using 24 field layouts, and so like a 12 field like this, a 16
Hmm.
like this, and a 24 is big, so you'd have to scan them and stitch them together in Photoshop. So it probably took me 2-3 years to literally
Wow.
scan all the artwork before we started resuming production.
Well, how far along would you say it was when the Florida studio shut down?
It was about 50% rough animated.
Okay. Okay. Now you mentioned Tom Bancroft, and I hear you're close with him, and I saw, a lot of when I kind of background checked it as it were, I saw his name came attached to it a few times. Um, would any of those widely known animators be involved in this project?
At this point in time, no, sir.
Okay. Can you tell us about who is?
Yes, I'll let Nicholas
Okay.
speak to some of them. Tom,
Okay.
when we really resumed animation, I had stuff coming across my desk. About the first 4 scenes, I would take a look at them and make my notes and kind of send them over to Tom and be like, "What do you think? What do you think of my notes?" And he's like, "Dude, you're right on point." And so, like after the fourth or fifth one, he's like, "You don't need to bother." He's like, "You got this." He's like, "I've
Stop
told you for
calling.
years, you
Yeah.
got this." So he's just kind of been like that animation advisor to kick me in the butt and keep me going forward.
Nice.
As for the people we have on the project, we've been lucky that actually we kind of did an outreach and we got people from all over the world. I mean, we had people from Ukraine, we've had people from Philippines, and still actively working on it. Brazil, come on board. I've had a couple of people returned. So like
Okay.
Jasno, I can't say Jasno's last name without destroying it. You
Jasno
can
Farquhar.
look him
Yeah.
up. He's come back. He's going to do a particular waterfall for me. Um, well, who else? Steve McDermott did water animation and flower animation back at the studio, and he came back and did a waterfall for me as well.
Very nice.
And so it was nice having some of these, more senior people come back. But we've had people of a variety of skills actually working on the project.
Now, are you guys keeping it hand drawn or like even digitally 2D?
It's digital. I mean, everything's digital
Yeah,
from.
yeah.
So everybody's mostly working in Toon Boom, and I'm kind of working in Photoshop and After Effects.
So my question is, a lot of folks will say that 2D is in a slump, even if it's digital, but a lot of students and early professionals still want to get their hands into that in some way. Would you say some of your crew are the younger folks are like, I want to do something hand drawn?
Yeah, we had a couple of people straight out of college.
I can speak to that a little bit because
Okay.
Andrew is the person who's responsible for bringing on the Disney veterans to the
Hmm.
project. And when I joined in 2021, I helped with bringing on what I would call like the younger international staff, people who
Hmm.
haven't done something like this before. And, to a person, when they reached out to us or when we reached out to them, the common refrain was never had an opportunity to work on something in the Disney tradition, but really
Hmm.
want to. And people were willing to go above and beyond to join a project like this, even if there was a language barrier issue, even if there was a time zone
Hmm.
issue, even if we couldn't pay them as much as they would have ordinarily wanted or gotten. People wanted to participate in this, and we're a passion driven project. We
Yep.
That's our currency, and being able to rely on everyone investing their passion into it has made a huge difference. Honestly, we couldn't have done it without that,
Hmm.
and I attribute that 100% to people valuing the Disney Florida Studios legacy and people valuing the legacy of hand drawn animation and wanting to continue to keep it around and alive.
Yeah. No, I agree with that 100% because there are people itching, and as soon as they got word, it would just be, how do I get involved? How do I do that? We
Exactly.
keep talking about the flower and its origins, everything like that, but what is it, Andrew? Like, what's it about? What's the story?
Well, we're pretty cagey on the story. No, I'm just kidding.
Okay.
In
We haven't figured
short,
that out yet.
yeah, we're still working. We got no. It's basically the idea is the flower falls in a river in 15th century Japan, and originally it was a bunch of incidental meetings of things that just kind of happened. But looking at it and growing more as a storyteller, realizing you just can't have a bunch of like pointless interstitials, and we started pulling together the elements and actually weaving a little bit of a story within that 3 minutes. I don't want to spoil it too much,
No,
but
no, no. Yeah, no. Obviously, no spoilers, but
but there's a couple of samurais. There's a lady. Water lanterns. You can probably see about half of the short. in parts and pieces up on, social media and stuff like
Hmm.
that. Uh,
Yeah, for people who look through the Indiegogo and the other pages, you can get a pretty decent grasp of what it is. But the sort of log line that I've circulated to people when describing the project is it's the journey of a flower that connects three people and their fate, and it is a story about the love of the people we care about and the remembrance of the people we care about even after things happen in life that that may be disruptive.
all that in 3.5 minutes with no speaking.
Exactly.
But those are the best. I'm a very strong preacher of silence and animation. Like the story could be told through the animation. So,
Yeah.
do you think had the Florida studio remained open, um, would that have gone into a massive production at all? I know it was
It
an after hours project, but I feel like some of those were grasped onto and turned into something.
No, I don't think it would have ever been, it just would have been something that would have eventually been completed at the
Hmm.
Florida studio. However, what I look at that moment in time when the studio shut down is like, just kind of despair of like, I'll never get this thing ever finished. Let's just put it in the closet and leave it alone. Um, it gave me a lot of time personally to grow. So, my background is cell painter,
Hmm.
cameraman, final checker. I'm not an Aaron Blaze. I'm not
Yep.
these guys that come through the ranks and draw and draw and become directors and all that stuff. I've always considered myself kind of like just a dude, in the back. I'm, nobody of importance. Let's put it that way. And so it was kind of hard actually coming up or stepping up to, to direct at the
Hmm.
studio. Well, intimidating is like the word. Like, what if I do something wrong, or what if this, and in my 30s, I've been able to put that all aside in the last 15 plus years, being outside of Disney and working with my art director. And it's like, yeah, I don't care. Reach the point in my life anymore. I don't care. Let's just do the film. Let's just make it look like the way we want it to look. So when I look at a frame, I go, cool, I love it. Let's do that. Instead of worrying about what everybody says about it.
Hmm.
And it has turned into, well, I would say it's turned into what a project I'm very, very proud of. But
Good.
one that I don't think it would look like it does if we had finished it at Disney. It would have looked like a completely different project. So it's interesting to see how time changes things. I did actually show it to Roy Disney Jr. at one point, and he saw an early cut and loved it. And he said, "Just show me more, when you're done." So kind of the idea, like Peter Schneider and these guys knew that it was there, but it wasn't really official, so nobody really officially had to
Yeah,
look at
yeah.
it. If it had gotten finished at Disney, they probably would have said, "Oh, that's great. Let's put it on something, and we're done."
One of the DVD collections.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
When you
Or
said
attached to a feature, maybe.
when you said
Some of
Roy
the shorts came
Disney,
out that way.
when you said Roy Disney Jr., I immediately pictured, oh my God, this could have been in Fantasia 2000. So
There was internal hope that maybe that would have been something that could have happened, but it didn't. And that's just the way life goes. I'm a huge fan of Fantasia, so
yes,
when the second one came out, I was like, man, those are really good. Wish I could have had one, but that's not the way life works out. You work with what you got and go with what you can.
I like that. Now, Nicholas, how did you come into play?
So in 2021, Andrew had already scanned all the artwork over the 3 year process before that. And in 2020, he and the art director, Jason Wilson, had been doing quite a lot of extensive work on the backgrounds prior to that point. So by 2021, they were ready to launch a Kickstarter,
Hmm.
and they did, and that attracted a fair amount of attention from people who were just hearing of the project for the first time. I was one of those people. So I contributed to the campaign, as someone who valued hand-drawn animation and the Florida studio, and I had no idea such a film existed. That campaign got close, but didn't succeed in raising all of the funding. And then afterwards, I reached out to Andrew and said, I would really like to be involved in this somehow. Let me know how that might be possible. And so we got to talking, and ultimately it led to me joining the film as a producer. I think it's worth noting that this is the sort of project that is possible in our sort of present day time
Yes,
and
yes.
wouldn't have been otherwise because Andrew and I have never physically met. We will
Oh
most likely
wow,
meet for the first time at the premiere. And this is, like I have not met any of the crew except for the editor in person. Most of
wow.
them don't live anywhere in proximity to me, not even on the same continent as me. But we're capable of putting together a project like this in this present moment because of the connections that have been created since 2020. And
Yeah.
it's kind of like a silver lining too, or or a blessing that was somehow brought, in the midst of all of the craziness we've lived through. But I joined the film from the perspective of having worked extensively with Japanese content and Japanese
Okay.
animation. And so I was the Disney fan, but I was also an anime fan. And I proposed, well, why don't we approach this from involving international crew? You'd be able to reduce the cost and
Mhm.
still have access to a lot of people who've never had a chance to do this but would like to.
Yep.
And so my first step was involving some Japanese located artists, people living in and working in Japan who I thought might be helpful to the project. They joined. A couple of people that Andrew reached out to, they joined. And then in mid 2022, we put out a kind of a large call for staff, and a lot of people joined at that point. That pretty much filled out the rest of the core team, with the exception of the effects, which we're still in the midst of doing, and which we're admittedly still in the midst of considering other people who might want to join and do some effects. So
Now, you said they're from everywhere. They're not working full time? Are they just contributing, or are they like all in full time on the flower?
for the most part, people are doing it in the midst of their other projects. We're a very small film.
Yeah.
Andrew and I and Jason, the art director, and the other core staff are all volunteers because we want to put what our financial resources are
Yes.
directly towards supporting the people who have joined us, out of a desire to work on this.
Yeah.
So for the most part, the animators are doing bits and pieces while they do other things. There are a few people, like for example, our lead cleanup animator who's located in the Philippines. This is pretty much his primary project. But other people are fitting it in the midst of working on features, working on other shorts, so.
Yeah, but you call it a small film. 3.5 minutes in traditional hand drawn is still an endeavor. So
Oh yes.
yeah.
Well, let's also, because the style of the film, I wanted something that was visually. I've always said lyrical visual poetry. That's kind of what we're going for. We wanted a
Mhm.
really, really smooth film. So we're actually doing this film on ones. The normal 2D animation is 24 frames a second.
Mhm.
You do it on twos, so you do 12 drawings per second. We're doing 24, so it's
Good.
also double the work as well.
Sorry, I'm a fan of that. So I'm like, good. Yes, yes, that's right, guys.
I have the thief and the cobbler in mind to thank for why I wanted to do one. But again, when you have you're using Disney's talent and
Yep.
backing and and all their equipment, you don't really worry about budget costs. And
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
now it's like Nicholas came on and he's like, "What can I do for you? How can I really support this production?" I'm like, "Dude, we need money. we need to finance. Be able to finance because literally you're financing a 7-minute film if you had done it on twos.
Yeah.
Instead of 3.5 minute."
Now, you talk about the Indiegogo and fundraising and stuff like that. How can those interested who want to help?
Very simply put, we have our campaign running until the end of the first week of September. Anyone who's able to join us on the journey is encouraged to come over there. Whether you can contribute or not, there's a lot of cool information over there that's worth checking out. We've shared a lot of stories and artist profiles and clips from the film and artwork and lots of reminiscences from Andrew about working at Disney. But if you are able to chip in and contribute, it would mean the world to helping us get over the finish line. We're planning on releasing the film in early 2024. And so it all really helps. And also, people who are interested in contributing to the film in some way are also welcome to reach out to us. Although we have nearly all the character animation finished at this point, as I mentioned before, we still are working on effects. So always happy to hear from interested people who love this medium as much as we do.
And a
Fantastic.
side note to that is some of the tiers over there that we're offering is actual artwork from the studio. So you can get a samurai drawing from Patrick Tordo or a Tim Hodge storyboard. All that stuff is up there and available.
I also saw when I was looking at the tiers myself, the highest tier I think gives you an associate producer credit.
Absolutely,
Yes,
money
that's right.
talks. So if you want a producer credit in Hollywood, hit me up.
Does that come with my own IMDb page?
It
And
does.
we do have an IMDb page. Yes,
Yeah,
Nicholas.
no, it's absolutely IMDb eligible. We
Wow.
already have a few people who have contributed at that level in prior private fundraising before the Indiegogo happened. That you can find them on IMDb.
That's very cool. I like that a lot. Now, what are your plans for release besides just a digital copy to those who donated?
We want to
Uh,
basically hit up the film circuit, the
Okay.
short animation circuit, and get it into as many film festivals as possible.
Yeah,
Very nice.
initial plan will be we would like to do a premiere or perhaps a series of premieres in locations that are relevant to our crew and to our contributors. So first and foremost, priority would be to premiere it in the Nashville area for all of the people local to Andrew who have worked on the film for a long time. Also, would love to have an event in Orlando if possible for all of the people who remain there that worked on the film from '98 to 2004. Then after that, film festival release, and we are planning for global submissions to film festivals. We especially would like to screen the film in Japan
Hmm.
for the benefit of the people over there who've worked on the film and helped us so much. And then after that, longer term plans are digital release for the backers, digital release on demand. We would like to do a Blu-ray release as well. And looking much further into the future, like further forward statement, I would be very interested in putting together a short documentary that explains
Hmm.
the process of how this film came about because it's quite an interesting story.
Yes,
Um,
very much
and
so.
uh, and there's a lot of material that may also be coverable in book form or in other forms, just that would encompass the history of the Florida Studios legacy and all the many people who have touched this film over the decades.
Very cool. I'm glad that you're just like, I just want to put it out there. Like you have a plan, you guys are going for it, and you guys are gonna have to call me when you do the Orlando premiere. So
Absolutely.
I could go out of my roof and probably see the studio from my house. So that's I want to say thank you for sharing the time and having this conversation with me.
Thank you
Thank
so
you.
much.